Hi guys, Frankie V from Frozen Sun with a long overdue episode of behind the scenes of Urban Terror HD and Unreal 4. And I kind of apologize, but unfortunately Windows 10 decided to break shadow play on me, so I couldn't do anything really until I got around to fixing the problem, or in this case the problem managed to fix itself with a recent update or upgrade of Windows 10. So lucky me, we can get back onto let's see, the topics that have been kind of piling up over a while, and certainly there is enough content of interest, let's say, to probably turn this into a into a 2 hour, 3 hour episode. Just general rambling to begin with, but that has been corrected. So. Instead, I'll pick a couple of interesting subjects that are on the bench. The first bit of news, of course, though, is that Urban Terror HD is forming up and is in a playable type of condition as a very rough alpha playable version over the network. So in other words, players can hook up to a server and shoot one another, and they fall down dead, even though most of the weapons are a little slightly overpowered. But as for some of the primary functionality, as the primary, secondary weapons and sidearms and what have you, there's some enough basic functionality to it that we can start gluing some other stuff moving forward. So that's a good news. Okay, so kind of play catch up as far as something of interest. As we all know and love, are some of the conversations that take place on the forums as to weapons, as to, should we have tons, should we have one or two, should we have this, should we have that. So unfortunately, there's nothing that we can do as far. That's not true. I'm going to be honest. There's limited effort that we can do as far as tweaking or updating weapons in IdTech 3 slash 4.2, 4.3, soon to be 4.3, due to the resource requirements of just putting something simple into the game. Now, the backstory of that is, well, theoretically, yeah, it's simple enough, but to be able to get a weapon into it, well, let's take the P90 for example. When I joined the team about 6 years ago, or should I say Shanghai, which is a totally different story altogether, the first project they gave me was the P90, which has been sitting on the development rack for probably about 2, 3, maybe even 4 years previous. So let's say 10 years. So it's been on the rack for 10 years in development until it made it into the loadout. Now, the reason being behind that, of course, is it was not that difficult, but that did in its final completed form. It took an animator, it took a content creator, it took two coders to actually get that particular weapon into the game. Based on its requirements as being unique and custom to that weapon. So this will play out. Hang on, stick with me. It'll make sense in just a moment. So that's the reason why it took so long. And some of the uniqueness to it was, of course, that we wanted a 50-round ammo box that, as you fired, each bullet is picked off one at a time until the magazine. You could see through the clear plastic casing that the bullets have been completed. Now, I've noticed with most P90s, they kind of cheat because they just basically paint over the magazine. But moving forward, I think that anything that we're going to be putting in the HD, we want to craft that's a given. We want to craft something like a weapon rather than just going to Walmart and buying Guns R Us off the shelf and tossing it in. So there's a lot of decision making that necessary to be made, but that progression 10 years is rather unacceptable. So the weapons that you see now are that's it. Basically, that's all that was left on the rack. We cleared all that backlog out because of the rapid development to 4.2, which drove everybody crazy because it was an opportunity to just get a whole bunch of stuff done, and then hope and keep our fingers crossed that nothing really seriously broke. We just didn't throw at it like a bunch of crap. We did actually made a serious effort to make sure that they were properly implemented. But the nature of the beast is something always gets broken. So with 4.3, it's the time to kind of say, okay, that's it. Enough is enough. Let's start to fine tune the weapons as a whole due to the stuff that was broken, the difference of what was broken between 4.1 and 4.2 as far as I won't get into that. That's a whole different rant that I don't want to get to cloud the issue at the moment. But 4.1, there are serious issues, and if you question me on the forums, I'll tell you what they were. I'll be more than happy to. But it is to say, lessons learned are being used for Urban Terror HD as far as availability goes. We don't want something sitting on the rack, sitting there for 10 years waiting for complete implementation. Rather, having something that's on the rack already complete and ready to be done, which is what we have access to as far as Urban Terror HD goes. And this is where things get interesting, because these are the current weapons that we've kind of got rigged out to be used within the alpha stage. So you can see it's certainly a limited number of weapons, and of course the weapons that are going to be added. We're going to try to initially start off with a select few of primary, secondaries, as well as sidearms, and then as things sort of pan out to how we expect them to pan out. Okay, there's you gotta go away. Okay, sorry about that. As things start to pan out and formulate, and then that's how we plan things in progress. Well, it's a problem, but it's actually a nice problem to have, that you have too much guns. Now, how many guns do we have? Well, we got about 24 that are ours, that are in some form of completion, that need texturing and rigging and animations applied, as well as assets, core assets that we've bought. So that's about another 24 there. So about 40 weapons that we have access to. Plus, we have the ability to composite to any kind of weapon that we want. So the first direction that we're thinking here is, of course, having a select few core weapons, and then add additional weapons as to availability to, say, the server operator who might decide that as an example, this is not what's going to happen, this is just an example, so please don't hold me to it. But as an example, the server operator, like previous versions of Unreal Tournament, could add modifiers to the server functionality. You know, it's a bunch of check boxes that they go click, 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 click. Okay, I want this, click, click. I want instant gib, click. Okay, I want rapid fire rocket launchers. So they could add modifiers to whatever the game type that they have within the context of the game mechanics. So, you know, it wasn't too out of bounds, but at the same time, added a little bit more flavor and personality, as well as customization as to the benefit of the server operator / their personal home community that they've built up over the years. You know, there's communities out there that, like, well, Superman map, there's an entire community built around just that map. We very rarely hear from, by the way, because they're pretty well content to just doing things on their own without having to actually hook up to anything. So anyways, today's subject, in a long list of subjects that are kind of stacking up here, is we're going to talk a little bit about weapon manipulability in Urban Terror HD as, well, let's say a starting point. Now, weapons selection or development in HD is totally different. In Urban Terror 4.2, IdTech 3, each weapon is unique and custom on its own as far as design and flexibility goes. The P90, as I said, for example, has a unique bullet box, which has to be clear plastic, which is only unique to that weapon. So you can't just go out and copy and paste a bunch of code from here to over there and have a perfect one-to-one representation of all the key features that you need with that particular weapon of choice. So that adds to, of course, to the development time. You know, we got P90 that's been on the rack and finally working to some degree of functionality after about 10 years, where that same thing can probably be accomplished in a few days in Unreal 4, just simply based on adding whatever we want to this global parent class. Each of these weapons is a child of the parent class called shooter weapon instant. Meaning that if we want to add, even if it's a custom requirement, we can add that to the parent, and it ripples down the chain to all if we have 200 weapons, each of the weapons that are part of the loadout will get that feature update boost upgrade without going to each one of the blueprints that we have, say in Unreal in Urban Terror 4.2 Intake 3, where you have to go to each and every weapon to make any kind of adjustment. So out of the box, based on some basic preliminary functionality applied to shooter weapon instant, we can then modify the weapon as to uniqueness, as to specification requirements. So hopefully it didn't get too mumble jumbled. Okay, so as to what we have, the most popular weapon, of course, is the LR300, and everybody, I would say about 80% of the players play with the LR. Maybe another 10 probably use the the M16, and of course we start going down the list. So this is the other problem. The other problem, well, it's not really a problem. It's just the way it is that there'll always be the popular weapon, the LR, the M4 as a selection, and we listen to them people argue back and forth as to possible differences, or as to unique specifications, or are they the same damn specification on the two different guns? Who knows? I don't know. I don't want to know. And to be honest, it's more fun to let the players argue about is it or isn't it. So that's we'll call that the little Easter egg until somebody can actually go down and check on specifications to see if it actually is different from one another. Don't want to know, don't tell me. Okay, but getting back onto why this is a better solution is one person can add, composite, build a unique weapon in a day, throw it into the loadout, and have it available rather than it sitting on the rack and people trying to make decisions on how over the course of 10 years it needs to be implemented and when it will get done, who's going to do the menu work, who's going to do this, who's going to do that, and well, I think the P90, I think I mentioned it already, it took 4 people to actually do the implementation of that just one weapon. The Glock, Hoy started the Glock, and that must be about 4 years ago now, at least, maybe even longer than that. The Benelli, is it a Benelli? Benelli? I'm probably pronouncing it wrong. That shotgun that shoots slugs instead of shot. That's been probably about as long as the P90. The one that's probably got the least amount of rack time was probably the 1911, which is probably about 4 years to get that finally get into the game. So what you see now, that's it. That's what you get. 4.3 is the opportunity now to go in there and do any kind of major polishing under strict control, under proper testing, and not poke at numbers just to hopefully that everything will correct itself. Because what will happen, I guarantee it, is the weapon that is the lowest on the list will then become the most powerful weapon in the loadout, and then whatever's above that will then be rotated to the bottom of the list. So there will always be the weapon that nobody likes, the ugly duckling. So if we can give it a little bit more functionality, that's fine. But if nobody's using it, that's cool too, just as long as it's there. And that's the mandate for Urban Terror HD under Unreal 4, is just to make it available so it becomes an option, as compared to 6 years ago, which we really had nothing, so to speak. So there's no fear of us to actually flooding the game at the Intake 3 version with weapons, because it's just nothing left available to put in. Okay, so moving on and forward, why is this unique? As I mentioned, these variables and what have you are contained within the parent class as a child. So the LR in this case can be modified for a lot of common things that you're familiar with. Like, for example, head damage. Well, that's too much. We'll make that 0.3. Done. Okay, throw it out there. Somebody's going to get headshots, get a lot of complaints on the board. Well, we'll make an instant kill. 1, boom, done. Send it out the next day. And they're going to say it's too powerful. Okay, 0.7, done. Okay, it's that easy. Compile. Off the rack. So you can change these quite quickly and easily just based on what's in front of you, and not having to go drill down into the hierarchy that that inflicts the current loadout type of situation. Like, for example, specifications is located over here. Loadout information is loaded over there. We have menu markup over here. We have icons that have to be loaded by code, which means the coder has to come in and implement that into the loadout so that it is displayed properly and correctly onto the screen as to its position. Then, of course, the specifications that have to be adjusted for each given weapon, and sometimes it's unique to that particular weapon, which then can ripple through the entire and create a mess. Blah blah blah. That's my rant. I'm done with that. Move on. Okay, so we have head damage, chest damage, stomach damage, leg damage. Probably could just go with head, chest, and leg damage to correspond to whatever's available if we wanted to, and it'd take 3, but we'll go with chest damage, which can be nullified by simply going 0.4. So the chest is the same value as the stomach damage as it is to the leg damage. Or if we want kill shots to be leg, set that to 1 and reverse all this stuff, and it's quickly and easily modified. Armor mod, my guess, I haven't played with it yet, is if the player is wearing armor, then this becomes a multiplier as to these values up here as to its value. So if we multiply that, it's probably a division, I'm not too sure. So it would change, for example, wearing armor would change it to a 1 or whatever, based on the armor modification value. Is that what this is? For hits on Kevlar or helmet. Yep, sure. Okay, recoil speed, these recoil delay, recoil fall, recoil rise, recoil spread. It's a procedural, doesn't require animation. It's a procedure type of driven event where the recoil of the rifle element, particularly in the first person view, I suspect, is based on these values here. So you can change the recoil based on the value without changing the animation as to how much recoil that weapon has. Case in point, it would have been a simple fix to change the recoil raise. So if that's 1, it would have been simple to fix the recoil raise in the current Magnum 44 by just changing the recoil rise value, and boom, fixed, problem fixed, send it out. Weapon spread, we know, well, you guys are probably more familiar with all this stuff than me. Weapon range, so if you have a scan and hit weapon like the LR, what type of distance, I don't know, that's probably in units. But if that's a shotgun, 500, done. Damage type, I'm not too sure what this does, so I'm not going to talk about too much. Client side hit leeway. Okay, a code thing, more of a code thing, so I'm not familiar with it too much, but hit verification, scale for bounding box of hit actor. Okay, well, I don't know, but anyways, it should be of note that a lot of the priority stuff like hit scans is done client side now as opposed to server side, which of course there's going to be a lot of arguments about that coming up, but that means it's much more highly accurate shots. So if you see a guy across the way, and he's in view and he's in your sights, and you pull the trigger, then you don't have that magic bullet type of effect that if due to latency the player suddenly jumps behind a wall, they still get shot because the server code said you're dead, and it took that long for the client to the client to acknowledge that they're dead, and in the meantime you've jumped behind a wall. Okay, that's that a lot of that stuff apparently we'll find out through testing, of course. But apparently, Epic says that's fixed with a lot of that priority stuff being managed client side. So that's cool. I kind of like it. Will it open it up to cheating? Maybe, but they're cheating now with server side services. Anyway, so what's the difference? The difference is, of course, if it's client side, it's easier to spot it. You won't be able, they could still probably cheat, but it would be easier to spot behavior based on unique client behavior, not something that the server is just simply serving up to everybody on the service. Okay, weapon configuration, infinite ammo, infinite clip, max ammo per clip, initial clips, time between shots, No reload duration, number animation, what's that? Fail-safe reload duration if weapon doesn't have any animation for it. There you go. Okay, start with tick enabled. Tick, of course, is the number of cycles that before an update is issued of an action type of event. So if, say for example, an item I guess this is how it works because it makes sense, is something is not really time dependent, and you can just do a tick interval of 1 second, then and it updates and broadcasts a replication of that event. It will only replicate it every 1 second. In the case of a weapon, you probably want that thing just spitting out a replication or an update at every tick interval. And then again, it's not that much traffic. Okay, but you can kind of tailor it. Okay, so what else do we have? Impact template. Okay, I'll go over that a little bit more once I show off some of the, I get to the episode that shows off current playability, current playing elements as far as putting a player model into the environment and run around, shoot off some guns and so forth. But the template is the information pertaining to how, let's say for example, impacts are generated when a bullet hits a particular type of surface. So the type of surface is decided by what's called a physics material. Now, physics material is not really a physics material. It just generates a behavior by definition. So, let's say, for example, we're shooting glass. Then the impact template will generate impacts, the particle effects of stuff being blown off the glass as little chunks of glass. If we're shooting into gyprock, you get a totally different effect of gyprock flying all over the place with particle dust being generated at the point of impact. I believe there's it also generates things like that. Generates decals and what have you. Also, sound is attached to it, so if you're hitting metal, it generates a metallic sound once the bullet hits. But if you're a mile away from when the bullet hits, you don't hear it. The guy standing next to it will hear it, kind of deal. So this is all handled through impact templates, and that has some other additional connectivity that I'm not up to date onto as far as usability goes. Trail FX. Okay, the trail FX is usually what's coming off the end of the bullet. I'm actually attached a particle effect that ejects shells every time the weapon is fired. So this needs a element onto its own, like eject shells. Well, this should be replaced to eject shells because I don't know. Trail FX sucks. I don't like it because it's supposed to be a tracer, but when you move the barrel, it gets around back and forth, rapidly back and forth. It's like going like this with that stupid mouse trail effect attached to the mouse, and it's just annoying as hell. This is a trail pattern parameter. That's the type of trail effect that it's going to be using. Muzzle attachment point. Okay, that's the point where muzzle attachment point. That's where the flash point will be, which is this guy right here. Muzzle effects, which is a particle effect. Which once I show off some of the stuff in the in-game, this will become obvious that this is actually attached to the weapon, and it's not aggressive. It's not as let's say a loud an effect as some have complained in Unreal 4 or Urban Terror 4.2. Okay, fire camera shake. You can add a shake effect. So it's the shaking effect is. Basically what you see out of your eyeballs being shaken around by the viciousness of the gun that you're firing. I don't know if we should be using this or not, but there's a slight, a little bit seems to add a little bit of flavor to it. Fire force feedback, you know what that is. If you have a runnable pack, or a gamepad or what have you. Loop muzzle FX, that's I guess when you have automatic firing. Versus going single click, bang, you have a flash, and if you have this unchecked, next time you go click, bang, you get no flash because it's not looped. It just goes to the end of the sequence and then says that's it. We have some HUD elements, primary icon. The HUD, well, I'll be showing that in another episode. This allows you to add various different icons. Remember what I was saying in marking up in Intex 3 4.2 that it required a coder to do the image markups for the icons as well as the icons for the secondary or primary texture. So in this case, if we were, I believe this has been forked off to a custom blueprint. But if we want to update a buff to this weapon here, a single person can create the icon that is required to fulfill this need once again. So that's pretty cool. Secondary clip icons, crosshair, aiming crosshair, laser dot, custom crosshair, custom aiming crosshair, etc., etc. These types of elements could be added onto, of course, as to usability. So, for example, you could tell if you're using do I have a laser hooked up, or do I have a silencer attached, that kind of stuff, blah blah blah. So this can be expanded upon within the shooter weapon instance, so we can add a little bit more visibility elements, and then when they're rendered, of course, they can be moved around the screen based on its UV value across the screen. That's pretty cool. Animation. This is, of course, is where the rubber meets the road. As to connectivity of the weapon to the player model, I hope I mentioned it, that Urban Terror HD under Unreal 4 is more weapon driven than it is player animation driven. So in this case, an idle sequence, if we look here, pawn 1, that would be your first person hands. Pawn 3, that would be the third person. Weapon 1 would be the first person weapon. Weapon 3P would be the third person weapon. So what we have here is the ability to create a slot in the main animation sequence that's driving the player model. That slot is then driven or transfers the required animation for this particular weapon to the main character animation through a slot node in this particular pawn. So pawn 1, first person hand, we're going to send the idle animation of somebody holding the LR 300 so that the contact points are correct, and then any animation that's added to it is additive based on unique animations for that weapon. So the same thing for the pawn, third person pawn. The weapon animation, that's how the weapon is functioning as far as this particular sequence. So in the idle sequence, it's it can be set to doing nothing if we want. As say versus a fire animation, where of course the pawn 1 would be the proper operation of the weapon and blowback and recoil climb and what have you. Versus third person doing the same thing too as well, but in relationship to third person space. The contact points for third person space are always usually different from the third person. Say that 3 times real fast. Once again, weapon in this case would be just a static animation of the bolt going back and forth, say as compared to the reload animation, which would then be a complete cycle of the third person hand performing the same number of frames of reload for the third person, with the weapon itself performing the mechanical tasks of the clip coming out and the bolt coming back as part of that reload cycle. And then the reload cycle is used as a specification as to say cooldown. So because we can change the scale, the rate of how fast or how slow the player can reload. So a difference between the LR and an M4 could be that the LR could just simply have a slightly faster reload time. So this is another specification that is not unique to the weapon, but is global and universal to all weapons, and it's available for whatever use that has to be used for. Okay, sound is generated by the events are generated by whatever has been triggered up here. So of course we have fire sound. You pull the trigger, bang, bang, bang. That's contained in here, not the player blueprint or player animation blueprint. Fire loop sound, same thing. Fire finish sound down here. Out of ammo sound in here. Reload sound, none. at the moment. So this is all scripted. We create a sound cue. We script out the reload sequence of it going click, bang, slap, tickle, reloaded. A quip sound, of course, is that change between one weapon and another. Okay, primary and secondary, of course, is pretty, and sidearm is pretty obvious. So this is a LR300, which is a primary. If this was an MP5, that would be a secondary. Is this a DE, a Desert Eagle, then it would be a sidearm. And then, of course, whatever the coder does to adjust whatever specification becomes visible to this value. Okay, I think that's all I really want to go into as far as everything else. It really has more to do with network connectivity than it does has to do with the basic functionality of the weapon. But it certainly, I felt it was kind of interesting because, dealing with intake-3 weaponry is a big pain in the butt. We're here. The worry is not should we, but hey, let's make something cool, make it available. So as to availability, let's look at the MP4 Pro. This is a bit more of an extension of accessorization than it is about a weapon that will be available. Will the MP4 Pro with the optics be included? Who knows? But that doesn't mean it cannot be added. So in this case, this is a composite of all a fair number of different components that could be made to make a unique weapon at the discretion of the server operator, because you're not limited to making the weapon as complete, but actually defining the parts that make up the weapon as a whole. Now, this is probably another idea I stole off the forums in the past of weight classing accessories as to specifications. So in this case, each of these items are added on that should, in best practice, be added as part of the main base component. As in we load in the M4 base, which is usually usually it'll be just like a ball, a mesh that is hidden in the game that acts as the proxy to attach all this stuff to. But each of these items could be added as to a loadout, creating a unique loadout feature of customized weapons based on specification weighting. So obviously the silencer should have a specification onto its own, so we create a model, static model, once again as a pawn, and give it a specification as to unique behavior. So would it actually, adding a silencer, decrease the sound to X number of points so that it's actually useful? Same thing with a laser. Would a laser actually attached to it actually increase the accuracy of the weapon as in regards to, say, for example, recoil? So that could be weighted and added as custom regardless of whatever framework they're attaching to it. Should we add an optic that is somewhat cosmetic but has some degree of functionality? The one thing that won't happen, there's the iron sight argument, which everybody on the team basically agrees with. The usual implementation of iron sights is you slow down, you have to hold your breath and breathe to get the accuracy. Where, if we're going with any kind of optics or iron sight, it's going to be purely cosmetic, except for maybe the SR8 scope. I'll show you something here in just a minute what I mean by that, as to specification weighting. After that, who cares what the framework has done? Does it have a forward grip? This is something that could be information that can be added to this as a pawn. This has a brain that says it's just not a dumb object. It's a brain that says this is a forward grip. So when we get to doing, say, player IK, okay, heads are going to explode when we get to that part later on down the road. As to player IK, we can just use this, throw that in there, and the hand is automatically drawn to it. We say, okay, we're using a forward grip. Boom, bang, it connects and it's glued to that grip. And if we want, we can then change different receivers, change the flap, change the receiver to something else. This is similar to an M4. or an M16 receiver. We can add proper different types of railing systems to it. We can add whatever hind or forward sights that you want. So basically, if somebody goes, oh, I want my M16 rear sights to add to the weapon. Yeah, sure, we can do it. Why not? It's just and then give it whatever specifications that are currently applied to, of course, the M16 in Tech 3, just to stay safe kind of idea. But as a server-side feature option, this will at least allow the server operator to create a unique experience on their server. And then, of course, just because it's there, it gives us the opportunity to decide whether or not this should be a clear player feature. In theory, let's say in theory, the idea behind it is we limit the use. We, it's the what's his name, Cartman. The Cartman class 101 of how to promote your fun park and have everyone want to go there by just telling everybody that they can't go there. so that's the kind of approach. So to kind of expand it on the idea once again of specification weight classing, we have the M4 Pro 2 Sniper. Will we use it or not? I have no clue. I'm just throwing this stuff in to make it available, which is a better problem to have, is to have it in hand and be able to do something with it, rather than what we had 6 years ago, which was absolutely nothing. So everything is good. The world is good. So in this case, who cares what this looks like? This is the specification weight as to how it's used in, say, relative comparison to the specifications as to the SR8. So we throw a scope like this, which would be like a 20 or 30x scope, then this automatically becomes the specification of how the SR8 operates, as far as the number of shots that you can fire, cooldown rate, number of rounds that can be held, and so forth. So this becomes a clone of the SR8, but it looks like an MR4 kind of deal. So this is kind of on the rack too as well, because the ability to make this accessible to the menu is just a click of a button. Visible. In this case, though, we would click or unclick hidden in game. If it's hidden in game, you can't use it. So when you load out, you go, I want a sniper rifle added to my M4. Click, and then all of a sudden, you're reconfigured based on using the scope as a I guess we call it a specification modifier. Okay, maybe I should call this one done. If there's any more interested in this, obviously, if you want more information, I'm getting a little dragged out here. You can probably tell, a little bit dried out actually. So we'll finish off here. And if you're interested in more in this stuff, by all means, drop into the forums. And this is all chit chat for now. The planning stage, you can become involved with the, if you wish, with the beer and pizza talk about designing Urban Terror HD for, well, whenever it's ready to be released, and have a bit of fun. Okay, that's all we really ask, is have fun. I'll see you on the next episode.